Hello and welcome back. I have a question for you today, something for you to consider. Who's the king of the monsters? Who the man? Who is the king of the monsters? You're automatically going to say Godzilla, aren't you? I can understand your reasoning. I can understand why you might think that. Toho's great gargantuan lizard creature crawled out of the ashes of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings in Japan in the 1940s to bring World War II to an end, and was predicated on that fear of the after effects and side effects of nuclear radiation fallout. But there is another contender that you might not have heard of. I think he's right up there with Godzilla. He's Britain's answer to Godzilla, and he appeared in 1961. His name is Gorgo. Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. Great to have you on board, and great to have on board some new subscribers who've jumped on the train in the last week, despite the fact there hasn't been many new videos because I've been suffering from man flu, the very worst type of flu. I'm a lot better, feeling much perkier, I'm back in action. I want to talk to you today about a very special film which I revisited last night. I haven't seen it for years, but watching it last night. It's called Gorgo. It was released in 1961 in the UK. And I remember watching this, and I think I've referred to previously, the double feature horror films that the BBC used to show back in the 70s. Universal Horror, Hammer Horror, or some other bit from the UK archives. And one night they showed this film called Gorgo. And I thought it was absolutely fantastic. It was terrific. It was very much Britain's answer to Godzilla, but I don't know if the time if I had seen any Godzilla films. They are aimed at a very specific market, and they come across to the West, and they seem a bit bizarre with this very obvious man in a dinosaur Godzilla costume leaping about, smashing buildings and beating up other unlikely looking monsters and robots. They just look a bit daft. Gorgo, being British, is a bit more mannered and a bit more civilized and slightly less silly, I think is the best way I can put it, because I like the Godzilla films. I can watch them intimately. They're not something I can watch a lot of because they are silly. But Gorgo is one I've not seen for years, and it's just been re-released incidentally by Arrow in a gorgeous new 4K transfer, which you can watch either physically or on their streaming service. But it's a very, very British film. 1961 was a pretty good year actually for British monster movies, because we had another classic release that year, Konga, which was a sort of I'm not going to call it a King Kong rip-off because it's a bit late for that, but it was a giant ape movie starring the brilliant Michael Gough, which is a film I can watch again and again because it is nuts, but it is so entertaining. Gorgo is a bit more serious, I think, than Konga, and it is very much cast in the mold of Godzilla. It is very much meant to be Britain's answer to Godzilla. It doesn't, however, have those touches that the Japanese films have, because as I mentioned in the intro, Godzilla came about in the aftermath of World War II, and he came about from fears of the effects of nuclear fallout and nuclear radiation and the effect it could have on the ecology. And that's where Godzilla came from, this creature that had mutated and grown huge and came ashore and started wreaking havoc around Tokyo in a succession of increasingly outrageous films, which still continue today. There are still Godzilla films being made, and some of the Godzilla films that we're getting from Japan these days are actually quite good. Things like Shin Godzilla and Godzilla -1, which came out a couple of years ago, which was a great monster film. The American Godzilla films, incidentally, are never very good. I really don't like the things like King of the Monsters and Godzilla versus Kong, because they diminish Kong. Kong is one of the great movie monsters, but I don't think that the new Monsterverse films do either of them justice. Particularly Godzilla's a bit boring in these films, and Kong seems to lose a lot of his majesty in being forced into combat with creatures like Godzilla. It never really works for me. But Gorgo, and in my head I keep saying Konga, so if I do say Konga accidentally, then you know that I mean Gorgo, but I'll try to make sure that I say Gorgo. Gorgo is a great 1960s film. 1961 it was released. Gorgo was originally supposed to be much closer to Godzilla in that it was a co-production with Japan, which would have made it very much Britain's Godzilla. It is Britain's Godzilla, but I think this would have made it officially part of the Godzilla canon. I don't know what happened. The production deal fell through, and eventually the film was relocated to France, and that fell through, and it was relocated to the UK. And I think it works a lot better being in the UK because it's ours. We don't share it with anybody else. It's our creature, albeit with its roots very deeply embedded in Godzilla's scaly carcass. The core of the story then is that an undersea volcano sends tremors throughout the Atlantic, and a prehistoric creature is unleashed from the sea. The crew of a salvage vessel capture the gigantic amphibious creature and take it to London for public exhibition. But this results in the creature's much larger mother and making her way to London, where she rampages across the city in search of her offspring, causing catastrophic destruction across the capital. And that's really the core of the film. That's what it's about. It riffs on King Kong, of course, with the idea of a monster, a creature being captured, brought back to civilization, to be exhibited for the delights and gasps and gapes of the adoring, fascinated public. And all that's in there. But there's a bit more to it than that, because we have the idea not just of Gorgo himself, who is huge, 80 foot, I think, but his mother, who's 200, 280 feet, who isn't very happy that her offspring has been captured by these pesky humans and wants him back, which is entirely understandable. There's quite a lot to say about this film. The interesting thing, I think, probably is that it differs from a lot of genre films at the time in that it is practically an entire male cast. There are no real female characters. I think there's one journalist who has one line in one sequence. But there's no love interest, there's no romance, there's no reckless woman being in jeopardy and has to be rescued by the hero. There's none of that, again, which I've commented on before, that slightly older man who has this relationship with a slightly younger lady. There's none of that. This is about the monster, this is about people who capture the monster, this is the repercussions from the monster being captured and the mother trying to get the monster back. The film stars Bill Travers. He's salvaging for treasure off the coast of Ireland, Nara Island, which is incidentally an anagram for Arran Island. And he and his first officer, Sam Slade, played by William Sylvester, are almost killed when a volcano erupts near Ireland, and the ship is nearly sunk. They head to Nara Island to repair the ship. Here they meet up with the harbour master, the slightly unhelpful Mr. McMartin, and they meet a young orphan boy called Sean. He, I think, is the female character substitute here. He's the one who has a bit of an emotional connection to Gorgo and feels sympathy for his plight and what he's going through and what's being done to him. Sam is Mr. McMartin's helper, and he takes Joe and Sam to see his collection of ancient Viking relics. Joe is intrigued by one relic which bears the image of a creature that Sean calls Ogra, the sea spirit. Joe and Sam's discussions with a reluctant Mr. McMartin reveal that Mr. McMartin himself has lots of gold coins and various other pieces of treasure which he has salvaged over the years. Joe and Sam send their divers down into the sea to see if they can find any more treasure, and one of the divers comes up terrified of something which he's seen in the water. Not long after that, a giant creature, Gorgo himself, rises from the depths and starts to move towards the village, but they send him back in with firebrands. Joe and Sam are savvy enough to realise that there's gold in that lizard, despite the protestations of some visiting scientists who, not unnaturally, think that this creature may be of huge scientific value. They take him back to London and they sell him off to Dawkins Circus, which is setting up in Battersea Park. It's a massive attraction, of course. There are some really good scenes of this creature, which is a huge costume, being transported through London, scenes that were filmed early in the morning to avoid too many crowds. But it's interesting to see all this location stuff around London where they're taking this creature from the harbour right the way through the city. It's quite an ambitious production, mounting scenes like that, when you probably didn't need to. You could have cut quite easily from them carrying Gorgo back to London and then him being installed in the park. But they go to the effort of showing this huge creature, which they've knocked out and stunned, being transported under a tarpaulin through the busy streets of London. So poor old Gorgo is installed in a pit in Battersea Park, in this zoo. The public are there in their hundreds and thousands, and they're gawping at this creature, which is just roaring impotently. It can't get away. Meanwhile, the two scientists from earlier in the film inform Ryan and Slade that Gorgo is in fact an infant, and the possibility is that there's a mother who is considerably larger out there. Sure enough, she is. She comes awake, she absolutely levels the village of Nara and heads to London to rescue her poor beleaguered son. This is where the film really shines in the last 20 minutes, because Gorgo's mother, Gorgo Senior, arrives in London, and the scenes in London are really incredibly well done for a film that was made in 1961 with the technology available. Again, as I always make the point with these sorts of films, No CGI, none of that sort of stuff, no digital tinkering. This was, for the most part, a man in a monster suit. Some miniature work, which is very good for the era. And I think what makes these sequences work, for me, a bit better than the Godzilla scenes, which are just man in a costume stomping about. These were filmed with high-speed cameras, which create a real sense of scale and a sense of movement, in that this creature is lumbering and moving slowly forward. It's not just jumping about like a man in a costume, which it is, but it's moving slowly through these extremely impressive sets. There's a scene of it walking up the Thames, and you can see Tower Bridge in the background and all the wharf buildings and gantries and cranes all over the place. And it just marches through London, demolishing buildings. I mean, the model work is really very good, knocking miniature cars over, which don't look particularly miniature, smashing through these buildings. And there are some quite brutal scenes as well, because there's complete carnage in the streets. People are panicking. And even though this film's fairly low budget, it's really big scale towards the end. Hundreds of people running and panicking through the streets, falling over each other, crushing each other in the panic. And there are scenes with buildings being smashed, people running through the streets, and the buildings and the masonry are just crushing people. I mean, you don't see anything, obviously, but people are clearly being flattened by all this debris that's coming crashing down as Gorgo's mother stamps to the rescue. It's hugely impressive, and I think that's what makes the film really work. The first half an hour or so is really good, very well done. There are a couple of slightly dodgy green screen shots of people in boats with backgrounds on green screens behind them, but that doesn't really matter. That's just a detail. But the film really comes alive in those scenes in London where Gorgo's mother is just absolutely causing chaos on a scale I don't think we'd seen before. I haven't seen the original Godzilla film for a while. Obviously, there are scenes of Godzilla stamping through Toy Town, Tokyo, and smashing it to bits. But because this is London, it's closer to home, and it's in Technicolor, and it looks fantastic. It's a long, extended scene as well. Again, it would have been easy for them to have a couple of scenes of Gorgo's mother rising out of the water and doing a bit of trashing, and then ending up at the park to rescue the child. But no, they go the whole hog. They spend a good 20 minutes of chaos and carnage, and it's very, very well done. It's really impressive stuff. And it has a very sweet ending because Gorgo and his mother just head back into the Thames and disappear back into the sea. As is the way with these films, the ending is a bit flat and a bit anticlimactic, with the young boy Sean just going, oh, they're going home. And it ends. I mean, these films didn't mess about at the time with character and, you know, scenes mopping things up afterwards. It was just the end, that's it. But it really works. It's a really good film, and it is really unusual, as I said, that there are no female characters. There's none of that love interest stuff. It's not interested in that. It's telling a story about giant monsters on the rampage, and I think it's great. It's terrific fun. And if you've never seen it, I really recommend that you check out either the 4K, which is just available. I think it's probably Blu-ray as well. But as I said, it's also on the Arrow streaming site, and it's really well worth a look. It's certainly one of the better monster movies of the era, and it's one of the better British versions. I mean, I love Congo, but it's nuts. But this has a sense of realism about it, I suppose. It feels a bit documentary in places. There's lots of stock footage of military manoeuvres and things which are used, and there's clearly dialogue that's been dubbed. But that doesn't really detract from it, because it just adds to the scale of it, and it does make it feel, as I say, a bit documentary in style, because it looks as if it's real, and it just has that feeling about it. It would be at best negligent of me to talk about the film Gorgo and not talk about the creature Gorgo. Gorgo is this huge 80-foot and then Mami's 280-foot lizard. Very much in the style of Godzilla. There's no arguing with the resemblance, intentional I'm sure, but there are differences. Gorgo doesn't breathe fire. He doesn't have spikes that light up. He isn't radioactive. He's a creature that's lurked at the bottom of the sea. He's a man in a costume. Gorgo and Ogra, who I assume is the name of the mother. Ogra is played by Dave Wilding, and Mick Dillon plays Gorgo, the junior version. Gorgo works, as I mentioned, because of the way it was filmed. It was filmed on fast-speed cameras, so in relation to the model sequences, it really gives this sense of movement and slow, gradual creeping forward of this thing as it lumbers around. Where it doesn't work so well, unfortunately, is the costume sequences where we do close-ups of Gorgo or Ogra's faces, because the mask is what it is. It has one of those sort of flappy jaws, so it's blah, blah, and its ears sort of twiddle a little bit, and its eyes glow blood red in places, which makes it look like what it is. Obviously, it's not an animatronic mask, but it has functions and it flaps about, and that makes it look like what it is, unfortunately. So that takes away from the realism of it. But I think the other scenes are so well done, you forget about it. You just go with it because it's so engaging, and the creature itself is engaging, and the action on the film is so immersive that you have to make allowances in films from the 50s and 60s for the technological ability that they had. So whilst Gorgo is a bit on the dodgy side close up, when you see him, her, whatever, stamping around, destroying buildings and smashing up the Elizabeth Tower and decimating Big Ben, you can't help but be impressed. It's a really underrated film, and I really hope that you will go and check it out, because watching it last night, I thought it was as good as ever. And I always worry about these films when I go back to them after having not seen them for decades. They're going to be a bit cheesy, they're going to be a bit ooh. But I think Gorgo is as good as it ever was. And I'm watching it, it just reminded me of how I felt watching it originally and being so impressed by the scope and scale and the ambition of it, because they really went for it. It's a great film. If you've never seen it, you need to see it. Curiously enough, for a one-off British monster film, it's had an odd afterlife. It was novelised by Bruce Cassidy under the pseudonym Carson Bingham. That was published by Monarch Books. Interesting, that Monarch is the name of the organisation in the modern Godzilla films. Wonder if that's where they got the name from. That's just a random thought that's come into my head. Apparently the book, I've never seen it, I've never read it, but apparently it does what the film doesn't do. It does introduce some female characters into the storyline, and there are some apparently quite lurid sex scenes in it, which I think would have been out of place in the film. But it's interesting, even at the time they felt that the film was lacking in a female angle, and I don't know if these scenes were in the original script. It may have been the script changed and certain characters were written out, but certainly that Carson Bingham, in novelising the film, felt that it needed a female angle and added some scenes to that effect. And even though the film was a modest hit, it did inspire a long-running range of comics. Carlton Comics, in 1961 to 1965, in fact, published a Gorgo series, which had artwork by no less a person than Steve Ditko from Marvel, most famous, of course, for co-creating Spider-Man. And when I was reading about this, I thought, this rings a bell. I'm sure I've seen these over the years. And I went online looking to see if I could pick up a copy of the books or something, just to see what they're like. And then I popped over to my fairly small collection of comics and I discovered this one, Ditko's Monsters, Konga versus Gorgo. A friend of mine sent me this years ago, and I don't think I ever looked at it. I just thought, oh, that'll be fun, and just filed it away. But I remembered last night, I'm sure I've got something, and sure enough, there it is. And this is Gorgo facing off with various other monsters, including Konga. So those two films, although they are not in themselves major entries into the monster genre, clearly had a huge impact on people like Steve Ditko. I mean, this is the man who, a year or so after doing that, would create with Stan Lee Spider-Man. So having dug this out of my archive, guess what I'm doing this afternoon? I'll go to the shops and then I'm going to read this because this looks like a lot of fun. And despite the fact that his comic era seemed to be in the 1960s, Gorgo lives on even now. Just this summer, Titanic Creations acquired the merchandising rights for Gorgo for some reason, and they released a series of comics which placed the events of the film itself within the universe of the original kaiju character, starting with a prequel called Gorgo Legacy. So that's my quick take on Gorgo, 1961 British monster movie. Great fun, really fantastically entertaining. It's 78 minutes, so it's not going to take up too much of your time, but I don't think you'll resent the time you spend watching it, because that last 20 minutes in particular is just epic and hugely spectacular. And it was made in 1961. And that alone deserves a 9 out of 10 rating from me. That's Gorgo. Right, thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, the next thing you need to do, if you're new here, is to click the like and subscribe button. There, click that button. I never know where it actually turns up when you're looking at the videos. And of course, you can click that QR code with your phone, which will mean that you're mine forever in my world of stuff. Right, thank you for watching. I will see you soon. Got some stuff coming up on the weekend, which I hope you'll be interested in. A new look at Doctor Who. And there will be possibly one other retro film, which I'm halfway through watching. And there will also be, coming up next week, another TV retro feature. Don't forget my review of Primeval Season 1, which went up a couple of days ago. Take a look at that. And there will be a new Collector's Corner. Collectibles Corner. coming up on Sunday, hopefully. So plenty of stuff to come. So you might as well stick around, because what else are you going to do? Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Until I do, you keep taking the stuff.